tonight on CBC Vancouver News. Landlord under fire.
Every time I told him I had a problem, he says, well, you don't like it, you can move.
Tenants left homeless from an East Vancouver apartment fire seek justice from their building owner. Plus, surviving the heat wave.
Definitely prepare for it. We all got big jugs of water.
How workers across BC are battling the elements in record-breaking heat. And inflation jumps again in Canada.
I would buy butter for $3.99. Now it's $7.
Food and fuel prices soar as another interest rate hike looms.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Good evening, I'm Lien Yeung. Thanks for joining us. Landlords of a building gutted by a massive fire faced charges in court today. More than 70 people were left homeless when a fire ripped through the apartment complex in Vancouver's Mount Pleasant neighborhood. Tenants say the building was left to decay. And as Joel Ballard reports, the owners are facing fire code offenses from years ago.
As she packs up her few remaining possessions, Valerie Dallaire can't help but think of her recent birthday.
July 27 was the fire. July 28 was my 60th birthday, and so I'll never forget this birthday. I don't want to remember it.
The fire at this apartment left Dallaire and her neighbors without a home. A property title search of the building lists the owners as Henry Phu Ren and his wife, Feng Yan. The couple has a long history of bylaw infringements with the city of Vancouver. On Tuesday, they appeared in court facing 20 previous charges for fire bylaw violations at the same building. In 2021, Ren was found guilty of 5 bylaw infractions and fined $13,000. Outside the courthouse, former residents gathered.
The building overall was neglected to quite an extreme, and safety obviously, well, I shouldn't say obviously, but I don't think was a concern of Henry's at the time, and here's the consequences of that.
CBC News spoke with multiple residents who described how the building was filled with leaks and mold. Rats, mice, and roaches were common. The back door, they say, was often barred shut. Dallaire had lived there since 2016.
It was just piecemeal fixing. You know, he could have kept this building and made it beautiful. He just let it get run down.
Her neighbor Greg Kelly moved in 3.5 years ago. When the building needed repairs, Kelly says Ren neglected to do it.
Every time I told him I had a problem, he says, well, you don't like it, you can move. That was his answer for everything.
Vancouver Fire and Rescue Service investigators concluded the fire was sparked by a candle, but also found that some fire codes were again not being followed. It has recommended further prosecution, which it says is not a common step.
Our preferred method is obviously to identify the infractions and inform the building owner or the building manager and work with that party to correct those infractions.
CBC News has learned that it's not the first building owned by these landlords to go up in flames. A decade ago, an apartment building in Burnaby caught fire twice in 4 years.
More than 10 hours after the fire started, and it was still burning.
It was eventually gutted, and more than 100 people were left without a home. Back at the courthouse, counsel for the city asked for a 2-week delay to review documents Ren sent late Monday evening that he claims prove he has taken steps to address fire code offenses. Ren refused to speak on camera but said he believes the charges against him are false and he intends to prove it with photographs of the building. Right now, the City of Vancouver is providing emergency support for the displaced residents, including accommodation at hotels, food, and clothing. But that support ends next week, and Kelly worries he won't be able to find a place he can afford, after already viewing 16 apartments.
We might be going from the Sandman to the street.
Ren and his wife will head back to court on August 29th. Joel Ballard, CBC News, Vancouver.
A year after a deadly crash that left 2 people dead at a wedding in West Vancouver, a 64-year-old driver has been charged. West Vancouver resident Hong Shu allegedly lost control of her car while pulling out of a shared driveway. She's charged with driving a motor vehicle without due care and attention. She collided with a wedding party at the adjacent property. The crash left 2 women in their 60s dead. 7 others were sent to the hospital, including the driver. After an investigation by West Vancouver Police, the Crown Council approved charges against the driver. At least 17 heat records were broken across BC yesterday. While some people can work in the comfort of an air-conditioned office during the heat wave, others are stuck battling the elements outside. Our Zara Premji spoke with people who are working through the heat.
Climbing to extreme heights and working on the tops of buildings across the province, there's already a lot of risk for these roofers. Couple that with a heat wave.
She's a hot one.
And the danger spikes.
The provision of water is critical, not a sip now and then, but again, staying hydrated. Having a glass of water recommended is about every 20 minutes.
But heat or no heat, the work rarely stops. It can't.
Buildings don't build themselves without us, right? We got to put roofs on everyone's heads.
I usually find that it's hard to start out, but then eventually you kind of push past it a little bit. Even though you don't feel it as much, you still need to make sure your hydration is up and good.
And they say the moment a heat warning is posted, they have to prepare.
Can I get some water, please?
And it isn't just those climbing up high. Many people have to work outdoors for hours on end, roasting.
It's really heavy, hard, because with a grill here, it's like really hot.
And a sudden onset of hot weather can come with risk.
There is some acclimatization that can occur to heat. However, when we have a heat wave like we're having at the moment, there just is not time to acclimatize. That takes up to 2 weeks to acclimatize.
And in the absence of being able to do that, experts say hydrate, take breaks often, and work at the safer times.
Before 11 o'clock or after 3, the cooler parts of the day.
Along with the warnings, there is some reprieve in sight. Environment Canada says much of the coastal region will return to seasonal temperatures by Wednesday, but central and southern regions of the province will feel the heat a day or two longer. And until then, some hot tips.
Just to keep water with them close, and also don't stay in the sun.
Pro tip, if you get a shirt or a cut-off bandana, throw that under your hat, soak it in some cool water, and that keeps you nice and cold.
Zara Premji, CBC News, North Vancouver.
And temperatures are still rising across the province after yesterday's heat broke national records. Environment Canada reports that the 10 hottest communities in the country yesterday were all in BC, with Lytton and Lillooet both breaking the 40-degree mark. It's the first time temperatures reach that high anywhere in the country this year. But with high humidity in the forecast, the weather agency is warning that many areas could feel even hotter in the coming days. And Darius Madavi joins us now with the first look at the weather. So, Darius, are we seeing more records fall today?
We are. We've seen several records fall across the south of the province. All of these places that you see here and those numbers are records that have either fallen, are currently being broken, or are forecasted to break in the next hour. So plenty of records. Kamloops has hit the 40-degree mark as well now, joining Lytton and Lillooet in that sort of not great club, but lots and lots of places, including on the island, in the Kootenays, really a ton of temperature records being broken no matter where you are across the south of the province. And it's because of this ridge of high pressure that's been setting up over the south of the province. It hasn't really moved from yesterday, so this graphic might look pretty familiar because this ridge is just really stagnant, really anchored in place over the south of BC and the northwest of the United States. So you can see how its impact here. Look at how this heat is just spreading up through the province. It's reached the central parts of the province now. Temperatures won't come down for a couple days at least. As you said, there's lots of humidity in the forecast as well, making those temperatures making us really feel that heat. Except here in Vancouver, it is hot for sure, close to the water, but it's not quite as bad as it is other places. Most places are 7 to 12 degrees above seasonal, whereas we are just 4 or 5 degrees above, so it should be a toasty night, but it shouldn't be too bad here in Vancouver.
Right, got to keep those blinds closed during the daytime, right? Trying to let that cool air in at night.
Definitely.
Okay,
yes.
All right, thanks for that, Darius.
Thank you.
An update now on BC's wildfire season. There are currently 374 wildfires burning in our province. There were 12 new starts in the past 24 hours, which is lower than usual due to the lack of lightning. 4 of those are considered out of control. 1 is being held, 4 are under control, and 3 have been put out. The BC Wildfire Service says a cold front coming from the Alaskan Panhandle will bring in more fire risks.
It's a dry, cold front that when it interacts with the warm air that's currently hanging over the province is likely going to result in dry lightning strikes and high winds, which is going to intensify some of the fire behavior in those fires we already have on the landscape and has the potential to spark more.
Bud says the Kamloops and Southeast fire centers will be the most affected. Meanwhile, wildfire crews are sounding the alarm over their struggle to retain experienced firefighters.
There are definitely challenges with retention and for recruiting. We have had some success with recruiting. I mean, I think we recruited 340 new recruits this year, but retention is an issue that we're keenly aware of.
Greer says despite training new firefighters, they just can't keep up with the number of new fires that keep cropping up. New recruits have no choice but to battle the blazes without much time to adjust to the job. BC usually relies on seasonal workers, often university students, but Greer says there are initiatives to convert them to full-time employees, and they're looking at boosting compensation to attract these full-time crews. Highway 4 on Vancouver Island is being hit with another round of closures. It's the only highway that connects Tofino, Ucluelet, and Port Alberni to the east side of the island. The corridor will undergo a 12-hour shutdown this coming Thursday and next Thursday as well. It will last from 8:30 in the morning until 9 at night. Crews are looking to remove about a dozen boulders the size of refrigerators. It's part of the ongoing work being done to clear the route after a wildfire shut it down earlier this summer. Until now, Highway 4 has seen intermittent closures and delays. It's expected to fully reopen at the end of August. For a second day in a row, the new ferry service, hoping to attract passengers between Vancouver and Nanaimo, has canceled all of its sailings. Hello Ferries was supposed to launch yesterday, but it failed to set sail due to high winds and a power outage that happened late Sunday night. Today, the company suspended all of its departures again and is hoping to operate on a reduced schedule tomorrow. The company says the safety and well-being of its passengers is steering its decisions. As Hello struggles to leave port, BC Ferry says its sailings between Horseshoe Bay and Nanaimo are operating as normal. Inflation in Canada jumped again in July. The annual rate climbed above 3%, up from 2.8% in June. An increase was expected, but the July figure was higher than forecast. As Nisha Patel reports, once again, food and fuel were two big drivers.
For months, inflation has been slowing, but that trend reversed in July, with the overall rate hitting 3.3%. Prices at the pumps were higher after declining dramatically over the past year. Homeowners are paying 30% more in mortgage interest. The price of electricity soared up nearly 12%. And while grocery prices aren't climbing quite as fast as before, they're still more than 8% higher than a year ago.
I would buy butter for $3.99. Now it's $7. And I'm a baker. Like, I buy 12 at a time. It's super expensive.
There's certain things where I would get them more often, and now it's like, oh, maybe only if it's on sale.
As consumers around the world cope with stubborn food inflation, some governments are stepping in. France worked with large supermarket chains to cap prices on groceries like pasta, poultry, and oil. It will cost retailers hundreds of millions of dollars.
That just gave some predictability, pricing predictability for people during, a scary inflationary time.
While widespread price controls haven't worked well in the past, this policy expert says a limited freeze on some food basics could offer Canadians relief.
We want companies to do well in Canada, but we also want people to be able to eat.
Others aren't convinced it's necessary.
Best method of fighting inflation isn't to try to pick one or two prices in the economy and intervene in them. It's really to control the pace of spending power.
Since hitting a peak of more than 8% last June, inflation has fallen, with some bumps along the way. But the Bank of Canada says getting to its 2% target may not happen until the middle of 2025.
We are getting some favorable trends in some of the underlying measures of inflation, and I think it's just a matter of patience.
The central bank has hiked interest rates from 0.25% to 5% in about a year and a half, the fastest pace ever as it tries to get inflation under control. Economists say there's a chance the bank will raise rates again in September. Nisha Patel, CBC News, Toronto.
TransLink is celebrating 75 years of operating trolley buses this week, and they're giving us a nostalgic treat by bringing back one of its earliest vehicles for a limited service run. Our video producer, Gianpaolo Mendoza, got to go for a ride today.
The first trolley bus vehicles looked like this one behind me. And 75 years ago, the very first trolley bus entered service on our streets in Vancouver. And replacing the city's streetcars at the time, trolley buses revolutionized how people traveled around the region. And with rubber tires, instead of being constricted to rail like streetcars, trolley buses have endured.
Where do I tap?
Well, this machine here. Oh, I should have demonstrated the machine here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I forgot about our grant money meter. My name is Angus McIntyre. It's the 75th anniversary of the trolley system, and I retired 13 years ago after 41 years on the job, and here I am still doing it.
Okay, Angus, I know it says not to talk to the operator, but do you mind if I ask you a couple questions?
Sure, go ahead.
Do you just have the feeling of driving a bus this old, this much history?
It's sort of in your nature. It's like getting on a bicycle and riding again if you haven't done it for a while. It's all sort of comes back to you. Although the steering is fairly heavy on these, so you have to be careful with manual steering. That's very good acceleration. You know, for something that's 75 years old, you put your foot down and these really go. So when the streetcars stopped running and these replaced them, it was very, very different. The workstation, the driver's seat, the steering, power steering, everything was so different. So the job was much easier. It was like driving a car.
Why is it important to be able to preserve things like this?
It's like any museum. It's part of a history of our city, and I think it's important to have that.
20 years ago, a fire ravaged the Okanagan, destroying several homes and forcing some 33,000 people to flee. We speak to the man who led the charge against the blaze and talk about lessons learned. It's after the break. And thanks for watching our commercial-free live stream. Cooling centers have been opened across the province as this heat wave settles in. But some are critical of the move, saying that cooling centers are only a temporary response, especially for those who are vulnerable, like the elderly. Yasmin Raniya has more on the call for more permanent solutions.
An escape from the sweltering heat. Municipalities throughout BC, from Saanich on Vancouver Island to Kamloops in the central interior, opened cooling centers today.
Cooling centers are definitely an important interim measure to help keep people safe.
The city of Vancouver has 19 cooling centers. Burnaby has 4, Chilliwack has 2. But some advocates say cooling centers are a band-aid measure.
It isn't the solution and it can't end there. We need governments to really go all in on ensuring safe homes.
Advocates say cities in the province should help seniors and vulnerable people refurbish their homes with air conditioning units. That way, people won't need to leave their homes to be safe.
It's definitely a complicated issue stemming from the fact that, you know, in BC and in much of Canada, buildings have been designed to keep people warm, not to keep people cool.
The province has proposed an update to the BC Building Code, which would require at least one room in every home to have cooling to keep the temperature below 26 degrees Celsius. However, those changes can take time. Advocates acknowledge it's important to protect seniors now, but have concerns about accessibility.
The missing piece for seniors with the cooling centers, however, they've got to get there, right? They've got to know about them.
People may have mobility issues or have trouble getting to the centers on hot days. Plus, alerts for cooling center openings are typically online and only come the day before a heat event. Concerns that will stretch on as long as this heat wave, expected to last until Thursday. Yasmin Raniya, CBC News, Vancouver.
20 years ago, a fire that ravaged Okanagan Mountain Park raced into Kelowna, destroying hundreds of homes, sending tens of thousands of people fleeing. At the time, no one could predict where the fire would go next, sparking fear that an entire city could be under threat. And with that anniversary upon us, let's take a look back at a piece our reporter Julie Matthews filed at the time.
The Okanagan Mountain Park fire is now around 1,200 hectares in size, but that could change in a matter of hours. It's still growing and very much out of control.
The fire behavior is just sort of a moderate growth, slow to moderate growth, but it's very volatile. There's lots of little crevices and canyons and so thickets, and so there's lots of places for the fire to sort of spark and spread.
Around 40 firefighters are battling the flames from the ground, aided by helicopter and bomber aerial support. Heavy equipment remains on standby. For now, it's useless. There's no road access. Even firefighters are having to be brought in by boat and chopper.
It's probably the most difficult terrain in the southern Okanagan, this Okanagan Mountain Park. It's absolutely beautiful, but it's very difficult terrain.
This Penticton initial attack crew is on standby. Normally they would be resting up for their turn on the fire line. Instead, they're trying to protect the homes closest to the flames. Carrying pumps and hoses, they're trying to find their way past locked gates to the 6 homes that have been evacuated on Lakeshore Road. A pump and series of hoses are being set up near each home to pump water from Okanagan Lake for protection. Firefighters from Swan Lake have joined the efforts and are installing all the sprinklers they can find on rooftops, trying to wet down tinder-dry shingles.
It'll create a problem with sparks and embers coming off the trees and more than likely onto the roof of the home.
Right now, the fire is 4 kilometers away from these homes. If it should come closer, firefighters will turn on their makeshift sprinkler systems to try to protect them.
We have the manpower right now, so we're doing what we can.
What happens next will largely depend on the weather and wind. Firefighters are doing their best to hold the fire, but 41 homes remain on evacuation alert, with residents warned they may have to leave at a moment's notice. In Kelowna, Julie Matthews, CHBC News.
And with us now, 20 years later, to reflect is the man who led the charge against that blaze. Jerry Zimmerman was the Kelowna fire chief at the time of the Okanagan Mountain Park fire, and he's since retired from the force about 2 years after the wildfire. So, Jerry, thank you for joining us.
Good to be here.
So, Jerry, you know, at the time, that was probably the worst interface fire the province has seen, and you and your crews really had to battle hard. It's been 2 decades. What memories stay with you?
I think about the people. I've been asked that question before, and I've said that I think that was Kelowna's finest hour. People came together. You'd think it would be all about the flames and the devastation, but for those of us that was closest to it, I think we were so proud of how our residents came together, our firefighters. Everybody wanted to help. We had everything from little kids wanting to bring me a cookie and a hug to a businessman that offered me his helicopter and pilot at my disposal anytime I wanted it, and everything in between. So the community really came together, and my fondest memory is there was just about no negative. And in these things, you always get finger pointing or negatives. We didn't have that, and that's my fondest memory.
Wow, that's very inspirational. And Jerry, you know, you really had to lead those crews. Tell us about your approach of fighting to save people's homes at that very critical time.
Well, the main thing was to keep people informed in what was going on. I had some very good commanders under me who were basically directing the firefighting forces. But my main job, I thought my main job, was to keep the public informed. And we took the media on as partners, and that was probably the smartest move we ever did, because that way we had the public backing us also. And what we tried to do was media overload. In other words, if I knew it, you guys knew it within 2 or 3 minutes. And that was probably the best maneuver that we made, because I haven't seen that happen in a lot of other places. I definitely didn't see it happen in Barrier, which was about 2 weeks before us, where people were out of their homes for over 2 weeks and didn't know what was going on. We decided right up front, if it hit us, even before we even had the fire here, we wouldn't do it that way. We would try to keep people informed, and it really worked out well for us.
And from the media side, of course, we appreciated that. So, Jerry, you're still in Kelowna. Do you still see the impact of that Okanagan fire today?
Not so much the impact. Where the main part of the fire came through is all rebuilt, and matter of fact, a lot of it further south, where there was nothing, the fire cleared out the trees, and there was subdivisions and houses put in shortly after. So no, there's not a lot of it left. But it's interesting. People remember, even to this day, I'll be walking downtown and somebody stop and give me a hug and say thanks, and don't even know who these people are. So that's sort of the aftermath that I'm or the things that I'm seeing now more than anything.
Jerry, that's a very nice aftermath, a residual effect. So now our province has broken wildfire records, especially this year, and over the years, BC has seen its share of wildfires that have wreaked havoc on the province. What do you think today's firefighters can take away from how your department fought the Okanagan Mountain Park fire then?
Well, we had a really good plan, and I think we were well coordinated. We had the different forces coordinated in ours. In other words, years ago, the forestry do their thing, the urban guys do theirs, and this we had it coordinated where we're all working very, very closely together and out of one spot. And I think they're following that lead even now in today's. As a matter of fact, I understand that a lot of my senior officers that were with me at the time who are now retired are working with the Forest Service, to help them. So I think the coordination between forest and urban was a lesson that they learned from ours and one they're using today.
Nice to see your lessons and legacy still living on. Really appreciate you taking the time to speak with us today. Jerry Zimmerman was the Kelowna Fire Chief at the time of the Okanagan Mountain Park fire. Former President Trump has been indicted for a fourth time. Why this one is more complex and how he's vowing to fight. That's next.
For weeks, it has crept closer and closer.
It's kind of scary. We've got everything loaded up in the car last night, and so in a moment's notice we can go. We're just listening to the radio now.
Now the community of Chase in BC's interior is on 1-hour evacuation alert. Families like Sean Campbell's are anxious.
Yeah, it's tough. We don't know which way to go or where to go.
500 people in outlying areas have already been told to go. A drill repeated time and time again across the province.
There's ash falling everywhere out here.
More than 500 kilometers southeast, this home video shows the scene near Cranbrook on Saturday night.
Hope these boys work at her hard and keep her going, keep it away from us anyways.
Now the fire is drawing near Dean Hogebaum's cottage, where he and his neighbors are on alert too, doing what they can by soaking their properties down.
I lived around here most of my life and hate to see it burn up that valley.
Near Kelowna, another fire, another threat.
So, yeah, we've got the roadblock set up here because of the fire.
Here, 10 homes are evacuated. A shift in the wind could threaten the city. Even on the coast, there are fears fires could break out in North Vancouver. Some park trails are being closed. Efforts in the last few days have resulted in minimal property damage, but there has been tragedy. Still no word on what caused a helicopter crash on Sunday. The pilot was killed.
It's certainly a tragic accident, however, though, and felt by everybody in our organization. Our condolences and best wishes go out to the family members. I think it highlights the very real risks that are associated with this job.
More help is on the way. The Canadian Forces are sending more troops into BC. By the end of the week, more than 3,200 people will be fighting nearly 900 forest fires, which for now show no signs of letting up. Cameron McIntosh, CBC News, Vancouver.
Donald Trump is fighting back after yet another criminal indictment. Last night, officials in Georgia charged the former U.S. president and 18 associates with racketeering. CBC's Katie Nicholson looks at what Trump is facing and what he says he'll do about it.
After weeks of tightened security around the Fulton County Courthouse, a long-awaited late-night indictment.
Charging 19 individuals with violations of Georgia law arising from a criminal conspiracy.
The indictment casts former President Donald Trump as the head of a criminal enterprise, which includes recognizable Trump world figures like Rudy Giuliani, lawyer John Eastman, and former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows. All to be tried together and quickly, says District Attorney Fani Willis.
Within the next 6 months.
Trump took to his Truth Social platform promising a large, complex, detailed, irrefutable report in a major news conference 11 a.m. Monday. There will be a complete exoneration, he said. The investigation that led to this indictment sparked in part by a January 2021 call Trump made to Republican Georgia Secretary of State Brad Raffensperger.
I just want to find 11,780 votes, which is one more than we have.
Today, Raffensperger released a statement. The most basic principles of a strong democracy are accountability and respect for the Constitution and rule of law. You either have it or you don't. Trump, the Republican presidential candidate frontrunner, now faces 91 criminal charges from 4 indictments in different jurisdictions. There's never been a presidential hopeful with so much baggage, says this professor.
If he had also given permission or orchestrated a break-in into the Watergate Hotel in 2020, that would be about the, at best, the 5th worst thing that he is under indictment for right now. These are all larger than a Watergate-sized scandal.
And all filling up his calendar in a crucial period when most candidates are hitting the campaign trail. Still, his numbers remain strong. This morning, amidst the barriers and guards, a small gesture of support for the latest prosecutor to have Trump indicted.
Fani is going to follow the truth and the law.
The question yet to be answered. After a 4th indictment, who will Republicans follow into 2024? Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
It's been a week since a wildfire destroyed the resort town of Lahaina in Hawaii, and we're starting to hear from people who have seen what's left of the community.
I was devastated. I was a wreck. I needed mental health, and I considered myself a strong leader, but it broke me. It still breaks me.
The fire killed at least 99 people, including children, but officials say they expect to find many more bodies. They're appealing for families with missing relatives to provide DNA samples. The wildfires in Maui are already the deadliest in U.S. in more than a century. The cause is still under investigation. 2 years ago, the government of Afghanistan collapsed. The Taliban rolled into the capital, Kabul, and took control. Since then, the hardline group has imposed increasingly restrictive Islamic rule, which is pushing women and girls further into the background. Margaret Evans has more on the situation and some of the efforts to push back.
2 years after the fall of Kabul sealed the Taliban's victory, Afghan women are still fading from sight, barely visible. Each new law to subjugate them harder to recover from.
We are erased, we are annihilated, we are gone. We have no rights.
Renowned activist Mahbouba Siraj still can't quite believe it's happening.
The fear of women gatherings is becoming like a phobia here. What is this? Honest to God, I don't understand it. It is terrible. I mean, unbelievably terrible.
Some, like this young woman whose identity we are protecting for her safety, have found a lifeline through the internet, studying secretly courtesy of an online American university.
I can see some peers, some classmates on the university. We can exchange ideas.
She knows she has advantages compared to others. She has English and access to electricity and the internet. for now.
We are afraid of what will happen next. I have been talking to some other girls and they were saying, we are afraid. And one day they will say, you have to stop breathing. You have to stop living in this world. Yes, we are afraid.
We want freedom!
We want freedom! How then to help from afar? Western governments and Afghans themselves, wherever they are, don't agree on how or whether to engage with the Taliban.
I think meetings with the Taliban is indirectly legitimizing them as a form of government in power.
Given the hard realities of life in Afghanistan, Mahbouba Siraj doesn't want lectures from the diaspora.
If the people of Afghanistan die of hunger, all of us, what do I want to do with education? What do I want to do with the rest of the freedoms? I really don't need it. You see, that's where we are.
With the lines of the Taliban hardening, little boys being taught to disrespect their mothers, and little girls that they don't matter.
We are really depressed and we are, I cannot say how I feel because it's really hard.
More important than ever to keep them in sight. Margaret Evans, CBC News, London.
A territorial state of emergency, the battle to save homes and communities in the Northwest Territories after the break.
Hey, I'm Johanna Wagstaff.
And hi there, I'm Rohith Joseph.
And we're asking for 10 minutes of your day to go through the 10 things that the UN recommends we can all do when it comes to climate change.
Please don't leave.
No.
And also, the things aren't new.
We are just wired to not do them.
We promise you to help you figure out your brains, and you and your people can make better choices to combat climate change.
10 Minutes to Save the Planet is available now on CBC Listen and everywhere you get your podcasts.
In the Northwest Territories, thousands of people are fleeing dangerous wildfires. Most of the evacuees are heading to Alberta, finding shelter in Grande Prairie and St. Albert. Carolyn Dunn reports on their stories of escape and loss.
This is all that remains of Natasha Cleary's home in Enterprise. After fleeing fires with her 6 traumatized children and their pets, Cleary remains in shock.
I think the hardest thing is just not knowing what's next, not knowing what we're going to do with our kids, and I don't know. I'm just speechless.
Now that these flames are out, the damage is clear and devastating.
Between 85 and 90% of the community is gone. I think there's 7 or 8 houses left and 3 or 4 businesses. We're a very close-knit community. We're all friends, and it's painful.
Rita Plunkett and her family made it to an evacuation center in Grande Prairie, Alberta by road. What she saw sticks with her.
It was really dark and just red in the bag. It looked just very eerie, and there's just bumper-to-bumper vehicle all the way down here. Yeah, we're a bit scared and worried, yeah.
Belinda and Mike Mandeville were stuck for hours on a closed highway between Yellowknife and Hay River with a first-hand view of the damage the raging wildfire caused.
Just to stand here and talk to you and think about my daughter who is still at home, and she has to leave. You know, she has to get out.
We're hoping for a better outcome this afternoon.
Yeah.
And hoping to hear she jumped on the plane with 5 dogs.
Officials are pleading with those who stayed behind to catch a military plane out of Hay River Airport as soon as possible. On Sunday, flames were so dangerous, even firefighters had to be pulled out of Fort Smith. But a little rain yesterday has bought them some precious time. Still, there is lightning and worry in the forecast.
We have fire season every year. This is unprecedented. It is not something that we're used to. It is very scary.
And life-changing for those living through it. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, Calgary.
And Darius joins us again. Darius, a very devastating situation up north. How are we looking here in the south, I suppose?
It looks like our fire danger has been increasing as well. We have not had any rain. We've had all that heat locked in place in the southern interior because of that high pressure system over the region. All the weather systems, the possible rain has been deflected into the north, which is why here in the northwest you can see that we're looking pretty similar to the end of last week after we got all that rain. But further south and into the central part of the province, we're looking very much like we were a couple weeks ago, where the fire danger just keeps rising. And it looks like that'll be the case for a few days yet. In the south, we'll see tomorrow temperatures pretty similar to today's heading into Thursday. Similar story. Looks like our last big spike in temperatures will come down a bit tomorrow, but up again on Thursday for places like Kelowna and Kamloops. Closer to the water, our temperatures will come down. Vancouver, Victoria. Tomorrow will be our last hot day before Thursday brings some cool marine air to cool us down. And then on Friday, we have a cold front pass through that brings temperatures down across the southern interior, bringing us back down to around seasonal, around where we would like to be this time of year. And it looks like a pretty cool weekend after that, finishing pretty much around where we would normally be this time of year. I also want to take a quick look at the rain systems that'll be moving through. You'll notice that the southern interior stays very dry over the next few days. A bit of rain pulsing through on Thursday, and then Friday is when we have that cold front move in. The warm air gets pushed higher up, it leaves some unsettled air, leaving the possibility for some showers throughout the southern and central interior, but also very likely that we could see some dry lightning in isolated places. So we're not, as we heard earlier this hour actually, we're not going to be out of the woods just because the heat is gone. We'll be seeing really gusty winds. We'll be seeing the possibility of plenty of dry lightning, so the fire danger will remain high through the weekend. So we'll keep an eye out on that. For tomorrow, we still have plenty of heat to get through before we do see those cooler temperatures. You can see the southern interior still seeing plenty of high temperatures. Further up north, it looks like part of the ridge of high pressure reaches there as well, with lots and lots of very above seasonal temperatures, and if they're not excruciatingly hot like we're seeing in the southern interior. And here in Vancouver, we see the same pattern. Temperatures come down a bit Thursday. It's not until the weekend we see really seasonal temperatures.
Okay, looking forward to Thursday when those temperatures come down.
Definitely.
Okay, all right. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
CBC's Absolutely Canadian series has launched a new film looking at the fishing industry in BC. It features those trying to make the industry more sustainable, from small catch fishers to Indigenous leaders. It's a fresh look at the positive changes taking place on our oceans. Here's a sneak peek.
We need to have better, resilient local food systems. It means that people who are passionate about a fishing way of life get to continue to fish. It means that people can continue to live in their coastal communities. And it means that people in Canada can access Canadian fish, can eat local fish, and know where it comes from, know what their dollars are supporting. To me, that's incredibly meaningful.
This industry needs new people to come into it who have energy for change and who are looking at like what the next 30 years of the industry looks like. What's the plan for down the road? Like, where is this industry going, rather than purely focusing on like very reactionary policies.
Yeah, they upgraded the weather on the 4:30 a.m. report to a storm warning from a gale warning. They're saying it's going to be 40 gusting 50 knots tonight with like a 7 to 9 meter sea. So we got one of our 2 strings out. We got one more to grab and then work our way down to the south end of Haida Gwaii.
The fishing industry for the last 100 years has been really based in like huge volume. For a company like us, where we're kind of trying to target a smaller volume that actually can move our own products and offload our own product and have it processed by some of our partners that we work with, and then actually getting it right to like the end point of sale, there's just so many additional steps that are challenging because we don't have the resources or the infrastructure to kind of do that.
Going out on the boat with Otto and Sean, I realized what conservationist fishermen are. And they want to see healthy salmon populations. They want to see healthy ecosystems for generations because they've been in it for generations. And this struck me as such a healthy connection to place and to people and to community. When I first pitched this idea to Otto, I have all these friends who would want to buy fish. He sort of chuckled. I think he thought it was naive and that, you know, that's cute, sell a few fish, but it's not going to change anything. Because it's just, I don't think that fishermen really believe that people would care to say, here's my money, I want to eat of this place, I want to be part of this ecosystem, this food system. There's a lot of people who want to do that.
We don't want to catch the last fish with a fish like salmon. It's a terminal fishery. You're catching at the end of the life cycle. You know how many fish made it up the river. You know how many fish went out. You can monitor for that. If as many fish come back in 4 years as were there the year before, then you're fishing at a sustainable rate. Is fishing a problem? No, not necessarily. With the data, it can be done very, very well.
Wake up in the morning, gotta get out there, you need to keep the boat nice and clean. This is what he says.
Tidy.
Tidy, clean, pretty much the same thing.
Tidy.
Isn't clean and tidy pretty much the same thing?
Got it. We want this way of life protected. We want people to be able to persist in their communities.
There's kind of like a mass retiring of the older generation. Whole body of knowledge that they've acquired over their whole lifetime, 40 years or so on the water. And all that information is retiring with them. We want to bring young people in, we want to educate them on what we're doing, give them an opportunity to make a living, and then if they want to continue with it, then there's so much opportunity.
That's what I like to see, right there.
We try to bring as much of the traditional culture back to the company. You know, sustainably harvesting, striving towards working on the ecosystems and making them bountiful again, once again. It helps everybody. It helps the wildlife, it helps the fish, it helps the bears, the seagulls, the eagles, and it helps us.
Showing Canada that there's joy in sustainable resource management, and you get to see the fishing from our perspective of how it's community-based.
We need to come together to manage so our kids, my grandkids, my great-grandkids will have something to put on their plate. Working together is how we're going to do it.
My hope and the hope of a lot of fishers is they just want to be seen. And that gives me a huge amount of hope that, together we can reconnect Canadians and the people who catch their fish.
And that's just a sneak peek of the feature documentary, Fresh Catch. You can watch it on our website right now and go to CBC Gem and look for the Absolutely Canadian series. Could you build a home from scratch with pretty much just your own hands and some tools? That's the challenge some Albertans set for themselves. How did it go? We'll show you. That's coming up.
While many people would do anything for a cool night's sleep, Brenda Reedy and her husband Keith Rousseau have gone a different direction. They sleep on their backyard porch instead of in their house with air conditioning.
A couple years ago, it just got so expensive to run. He doesn't like air conditioning, so I thought...
Just prefer open windows, really.
Yeah, I thought, let's give it a shot. We'll try it, and this is our third year, and I think this is the year that we're doing the best with it.
Because of the cost and the environmental impact, they say they'll likely never go back to using air conditioning.
Environmentally wise, it's nice to not be spending energy on, I'd like to say not a necessity for us.
By using the tunnel, fans, and taking cold showers, Reedy and Rousseau have found their optimal cooling strategy when they're indoors during the day. However, they found that they can't leave their windows open all the time.
We have to close them during the day so the heat doesn't get in and open them at night. So in order to remember to do that, I painted a rock. On one side, it looks like the sun, and it says closed. And then on the other side, it's like the moon and stars, and it says open.
CBC News installed one of these sensors inside their house to see the difference between the indoor and outdoor temperatures. While the temperatures were largely the same during the day, at night there were staggering differences. On the coldest night, when it was 13 degrees outside, the indoor temperature was 28. This heat expert says because Canadian housing is built for cold winters and not hot summers,
what they should be applauded for is recognizing the kind of ultimately the futility of long-term reliance on air conditioning because it is using up so much energy.
This heat expert agrees, saying too much energy use could pose a problem.
This has come up a little bit more in the literature and with cities we work with because of the risk of blackouts or just the risk of your air conditioning going out.
Chung says the short-term effects of heat exposure include things like excessive sweating, heat illness, increased heart rate, heat stroke and overheating, mental fatigue or lapses, and dehydration. Prolonged dehydration can also lead to kidney disease in the long term. Both experts say the approach taken by Reedy and Rousseau might not last. Chung said their approach won't work if temperatures consistently hit 40 degrees, and Vanos said it's important for people to acclimatize themselves to the heat as temperatures keep rising. TJ Deere, CBC News, Windsor.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
The Punjabi Market Live Festival returns on August 27th, and CBC Vancouver is proud to be the exclusive media partner. Enjoy live entertainment, great food, and family activities. Event info at monsoonartsfest.ca. And on September 16th, join CBC Vancouver at the second annual Come Toward the Fire, a free outdoor festival celebrating Indigenous community, culture, and creativity.
With the weather heating up, just about everyone is trying to find ways to stay cool, including this cellist who used the breezy ocean shores as a practice stage at English Bay Beach yesterday. Curtis says he's been playing the cello since he was 8 years old, and he's not normally at English Bay. His beach of choice is Wreck, where he's usually wearing a little less clothing. Oh my. Two brothers have honored their grandfather by building the kind of home he didn't live long enough to put together himself. Their grandfather homesteaded in southern Saskatchewan in the early 1900s, but he died before he was able to build a wooden house for his young family. John and Frank Robinson decided to construct one near Edmonton using traditional methods. Here's how it went.
I wanted to see if we were as tough as our ancestors were. If we could actually build a house without any electricity or cordless, tools, and what it would be like to do that. How much work would it be? How long would it take? Well, our grandfather homesteaded near Assiniboia, Saskatchewan, which is south of Moose Jaw. And he was a carpenter, and he built a sod house, and I'm sure he was dying to get building what he would call a real house. We do know that he died when Dad was a year old. And so what we wanted to do is kind of honor him and pick off, start out where he might have left off, building a homestead shack similar to the one that they were building at that time. We figured if we had 20 people, 3 days should do it. And they were pretty long days.
We didn't buy any materials from lumber yards. We had planned all of the details. And one of those details was to have horses break the lumber down. A student that I taught previously and his dad had hauled all of the materials down in 4 loads. And he just talked to these big, huge horses, and they walked down the path that we cleared tree by tree. And it was incredible.
There were so many times this weekend when I was going to go grab a cordless drill, and I realized, no, we can't do that. We have to use a brace and bit and turn it by hand. But your first nature is to just do whatever's easiest. And so we had people that were basically sawing almost the whole time. Well, it's going to be a place where people can come and basically leave their phones, leave their computers, and they have everything they need down there to be self-sufficient for a weekend. It's got a stove, there'll be firewood, and just live simply for a few days.
What a special project. I always look back on architecture and projects done way back when in, 1900s and beyond and think, how did they get it done? It's pretty remarkable. Well, there you have it. It was not easy, as expected. All right, that does it for us tonight. Thank you for joining us on CBC News at 6. A reminder to watch us on CBC Gem. That's our free app. I'll be back here tomorrow, and Tanya Fletcher is in for Denver tonight after the National. Have a good night.